Welcome to Fuller Expectations, the podcast where we dive into topics like aging with confidence, navigating identity shifts, building new healthy habits, rediscovering purpose, health and wellness routines in midlife, and yes, maybe even money, retirement, relationships, and letting go of things that no longer serve you. I'm your host, Carrie Fuller, and I am so excited that you're here with me today. My hope is that our episodes feel like a blend of personal growth, real conversation, and gentle encouragement. We'll keep things honest, thoughtful, and practical. If you have not already, please hit follow so that our podcast can appear in your podcast library. We drop episodes every week, and we don't want you to miss it. And if you thought of somebody who might benefit by what you've heard today, please share this episode with them. And now let's get into today's episode. Hello, Fuller Expectations podcast family. I am so excited for today's guest. We have with us someone who is my mentor, was a former boss of mine years ago, and is a current and always mentor, Ed Doherty. Ed heads up Ambrose Landon Consulting, and he works with a variety of organizations on strategic planning, leadership development, and employee engagement. But prior to launching his company, he held leadership positions in a variety of national businesses and nonprofit organizations. And in each role, he focused on the creation of mentoring and formal personal development programs. So he literally knows people, and he is so amazing to share with us his perspective on the seasons of life. And this is going to be a 3-part series, and the title is The Seasons That Shape Us. So this first episode is titled To Everything There Is a Season. And in this episode, we're going to dive into the concept of life and the fact that life is meant to change. It's not meant to stay the same. As we move through different seasons of life, we experience growth and joy and challenges and loss and reinvention. And a lot of times we're waiting for something, and we also experience the joy of renewal. Yet many of us spend times in our lives fighting the season that we're in instead of learning from it. So in this special series, Ed is going to join me to explore the seasons that shape us. And we're going to talk about the lessons that are hidden within them and how embracing change can lead to a richer, more meaningful life. So in this first episode, To Everything There Is a Season, the concept really is to recognize and accept the season that you are currently in. And the reality is life is never static, and expecting things to remain comfortable forever is not realistic. We're also going to talk a little bit about why people often resist change and some of the things that you can do to embrace the season you are in and to come out of it with a mindset of learning from it rather than being a victim of it. So please help me welcome Ed Doherty to the Fuller Expectations podcast. Hi, Ed. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Carrie. It's always good to see you.
This is a really exciting episode, and it was sort of inspired by your weblog when I read about the seasons. First, I was taken back to a childhood song that reminds me of my parents.
Turn.
Yeah, it's a great song. But, it's also, life isn't meant to stay the same. And as we move through the seasons of life, we experience challenges and joy and loss and reinvention, and we're waiting for things and renewal. And there's so many different experiences that happen. And a lot of us spend our lives fighting the seasons instead of learning from them. So I'm really excited to do this series about seasons. So that's something I'm glad that you said yes to doing this with me, Ed. So thank you.
I'm honored to be here, Carrie.
So, Ed, you have an incredible perspective. I want to start by asking you, if the person listening today took everything to heart that you're going to share with us in this 3-part series, what do you think would change in their lives if they took everything that we're about to share to heart and acted on it?
Instant and permanent perspective change. This falls into the category of you can't unsee it. Once you understand that you have seasons of life and there's a purpose to every season and they vary and they're not forever, you go through life with a totally different, permanent perspective change.
I love that. And that's a very impactful, positive thing. Because one thing I feel is that when you're younger, especially, and even some of us who are in our 50s, you're going through some stuff and you think it's never going to end.
Well, if you stop and think about one of the most famous quotes of all time is, I wish I knew then what I know now.
Yeah.
And that is a seasoned quote and saying, I wish that I knew what was coming. I wish I knew what I had learned. It's actually, I wish I learned by the time I was that age. So that's why I think it's an instant and permanent perspective change.
And I think it allows you to go into things with sort of a mindset of this is meant to teach me something. Like I'm going to get the most out of it that I can that will help me later in my life. And you might not think of it that way if you don't use that perspective. So that's a great takeaway. What is it about the idea of seasons that inspired you to write the weblog?
Well, I think that I go back to that song too, because I liked the song. And then later I realized it was a Bible passage, which kind of shocked me because rock and roll and the Bible didn't really go together in those days. And one day, before my son was born, my wife was crocheting something, and it was the first line, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose. And what we did is we hung that over the crib of our future baby. When he was born, a new season started, as it does for most parents or, first-time parents. But we've had that hanging in our house for 40 years plus, and I walk by it every day. And
Mm.
so I started thinking about how the seasons come and the seasons go. I mean, there's all kinds of cliches about seasons, but a lot of times we're not paying attention. It's spring, but we're still dressed for winter, using that analogy. Or, here in New England, as soon as it hits 35 degrees, there's people outside in shorts. You know what I mean? There's a different reaction to seasons. And so I started thinking about how we know that we change over our lives, but I think the seasons have a big influence on how we change, just like weather seasons change how we dress and, how much time we're outside. The seasons of our lives also impact what we do and how we do it.
And I think one of the things that I thought of is, when you're in your 20s and you're trying to get yourself established and you're looking for the big job and maybe moving out of your either college dorm or wherever you live into a new place. And I feel like at that point in my life, and I wanted everything and I wanted it now. And you just feel like you have a timeline for yourself. And that's so interesting to me because when things don't happen according to plan, that's like it really throws you off. But really, life is never static, and expecting things to go a certain way, while it's nice, a lot of times it doesn't go according to plan, right?
A
So,
lot
like,
of times those unexpected things are more important, have a bigger impact.
yeah, definitely. And so when people like resist change that has to happen, or if you have to like deviate from your original plan of what you thought should happen, can you talk a little bit about that? Because to me, I feel like that leads people down a path that they should be going down. And it was sort of like meant for them. Not everybody thinks that way, though. But
No.
you learn so much. And it's like what you learn throughout that really changes things. It could change the direction of your life, actually.
Yeah, one of the things I realized early on is things aren't going to always go according to plan. Some things are going to be good, and I like to enjoy them, and some things are going to be bad. And what makes a bad experience worthwhile is what you learn from it. I remember I had this job in Los Angeles, and people thought I was crazy for sticking with it.
Mm.
And I said, I'm getting 5 years of experience every year because it was such a challenging, so many problems. And rather than solving 12 problems a year, I was solving 60 problems a year. And so it accelerated my career and it benefited me for the rest of my working career, even though at the time I didn't really enjoy it, but I learned from it.
Exactly. And I think that having that perspective of what are you going to take from it? Like, what are you taking from that experience or what are you taking from that season? And I think thinking about it in that way of instead of fighting it, embracing it and knowing that you can get something out of it. I think you have to be open to that though.
I think that, that expression, you can't unsee it. I think when you're in a tough situation, the first thing you should say is, okay, what is this teaching me? What am I going to learn from this? How am I going to be better for this? What should I do to maximize this or get out of this faster or whatever the case may be? I think that, it sounds simple, but my recommendation is pay attention.
Pay attention, I think, too. Yeah, embrace it because it's meant to teach you something. Or if you're open, I feel like if you're open to learning something, even if it's you have to accept a job that's less than what you want, doing the day-to-day work of that job and like take from it what you can instead of being so focused on finding the right thing. Yeah. So, there's a lot of seasons that we go through that we don't choose. There's illness and divorce and
Hmm.
losing a job. And then later in life, when your kids get older, there's them moving out or staying when maybe we don't want them to. And with me right now, dealing with my father who's older now without my mom. Can you talk a little bit about the seasons that we don't choose and some of your wisdom around that?
I used to mock my father, and what I used to say to him is, wisdom is not measured in years, Dad. Pretending that I knew more, but I was only kidding. I think when you're young, you don't have enough experience to see patterns, and there is no wisdom without patterns. If something happens once, all you know is that it happened once. If something happens to you or you observe it three or four or five times, you all of a sudden have a pattern that you can analyze. And so I think wisdom comes with patterns. And stop and think about it. If you only overcome a problem once, why should I take your advice? But if you've overcome that same problem four or five times, then, you have good advice. One of the things I tell people when I'm mentoring them through a difficult situation is pay attention to what you're doing that works, because guess what? It's going to happen again in the workplace. You have a difficult employee. If you resolve that issue and bring them back, guess what? You know how to do it the next time you have a difficult employee. Stop and think about it. Today's built on yesterday. You can't get to today without yesterday. And the
Mm.
more you learn yesterday, the smarter or more effective you can be today.
You're kind of touching on something that I would love to cover because I think when we're older, we can look back and there's things that, to your point about what you thought with your dad, what the years have taught us that youth could not teach us. Yeah, I go through things now where I'm trying to give my son advice. He's in his late 20s, and I know I have to say he's in a better place than I probably was when I was in my
Yes.
late 20s.
Yeah.
But I always thought too that my parents' advice was just awful advice. What do you think now, looking back to the 20-year-old version of yourself? What did you misunderstand the most about life?
Well, just to touch on what you said, before I was 10, my father was a genius. When I was a teenager, he became an idiot somehow.
Yes.
And by the time I was 30, he was a genius again. I don't know.
But to that point, I want just to share with our listeners who are in their 20s and even 30s that fact that you may have a perspective about your parent or some other adult in your life who's trying to help guide you, that 10 years from now, you will feel differently about the way that you think about them, to your point.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, what do you think that most people in their 20s misunderstand about life?
I would say everything is temporary.
That's perfect.
Everything is temporary. The weather, the dinner, your
Yeah.
friends, your job, everything is temporary.
And
And
I
what,
think when you're then at that age, you feel like you don't see that. It doesn't feel temporary.
yep.
Yeah.
Well, and if you stop and think about when you're in your 20s and you have freedom and you are on your own, one of the biggest changes of your life. It is the biggest change of your life to that point because you've been spoon-fed, literally. One of the things I describe that freedom as is until you are done with school, whenever that is, tomorrow is always planned for you. And when you're done with school, you got to plan it yourself. One time, my mother passed away at, I think, 94. One time, I think she was 90. I was visiting her. She lived independently. And I was talking about what I'd been doing and who I had seen and where I had been. And she pointed right at me and said, "You lead a very interesting life, and it's all your fault."
Was that a compliment?
I think so. But the reality is yeah, I've had a very interesting life. And one of the reasons is I didn't rely on others to make my life interesting. And I see a lot of people doing that. You rely on your boss to make your job interesting. You rely on your partner or spouse to make it's up to you. No one cares more about you having an interesting life than you do.
Mm,
And don't leave it to anybody else. I'll give you a quick example. I have been in more than 30 Major League Baseball stadiums. I've been in 12 National Football League stadiums. I've been in about 25 NHL or NBA stadiums. None of it was accidental. I
mm,
remember one time I was living in Memphis and I was going to Minneapolis for business, and my 5-year-old son says, "Are the Red Sox or Bruins playing?" He
mhm.
just assumed that I was timing my trip and I said it was the Celtics. But make
Yeah,
it make your own life interesting.
that's a very good point. What do you think that, in talking about the seasons like of life, and I break them down sort of as like my 20s and my 30s and my 40s, like that. Do you do that too? Like people
Well,
look at it differently, I think.
yes and no. Those are loose, so I was a street kid living in Boston, when I was very young. And then we moved to suburbia. I went to great schools. I played sports. And then I went to college and I met the girl of my dreams.
Mm,
And then the first 10 years of our marriage, we had no kids and we moved 12 times,
wow.
which you could say that was a season. I have Los Angeles years, San Francisco years, Memphis years, Cincinnati years, nonprofit years, and now I'm in the furloughed years because I was furloughed, so now I'm a consultant. I tell others that people think I'm smart because of the color of my hair.
So you think of college as its own season?
Yes.
Yeah. And then each job experience or city that you lived in
Yes, it
as a
was
season?
easier for me because when you move to a new city, the last chapter closes and the new one opens, whether it's
Yeah.
a chapter or a season. It was just easy to because stop and think about it. You're reading a different newspaper or listening to different radio stations or watching different weathermen. And even
Yeah.
now, when I watch the weather and I see a national map, I look for the weather of places I used to live. You know what I mean? So
Hmm. Yeah.
but like for example, when we lived near Los Angeles, we would go to the beach on Christmas Day and send the photos back to our family freezing their butts off here. It was just kind of a tradition.
Yeah. I have a brother that does that now. So that's a good takeaway for listeners. Part of a takeaway would be around thinking about what season they're in their life now and thinking or asking themselves the question, what is this season asking me to learn? And to your point, what you said earlier, a lot of times I think people don't stop to like pay attention to what they're getting out of it that could be a real positive. Yeah.
The title of my book is Observations at the Speed of Life. And the core concept is observe, act, and stay with it. It's that simple. Observe, act, and stay with it. And where people miss is on the observe part because life is going too fast. And sometimes there are big clues and sometimes there are small clues.
Mm.
But if we're paying attention, observe, act, and stay with it can really define a season or a chapter.
And really take from it and learn from it and embrace it instead of fighting it.
Yep.
What season do you think that people fear the most?
The end season.
The end season. What is that?
Well, that's the end of life. It's a big part of everybody's experience, but you have no training, you have no experience. No one teaches you what to expect. Stop and think about it. I turn 75 next month. I go to more funerals than baptisms. And I think people get nervous when they can see the end. inside, I'm not going to live 50 years. And I think that inside we know that. And that's one of the reasons that we want this season to be permanent or whatever season we're in, because it delays the next season.
In this season of your life, what do you do now that you feel is preparing you for the stage of life that you're in and the future? Do you do things differently?
Yes, in two ways. I'm more legacy driven because I know that I'm going to be gone a lot longer than I was here. And so I want people to remember certain things about me. And the other thing I'm doing is I have done more planning for my family if I'm not around. I go back to what I said. No one teaches us to do that. No one says that when you turn 50, you should do this, 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 and this. So I'm doing it on my own.
Speaking of legacy, this is sort of off topic, but I like that word. And I think that's one thing that I feel like was always important to me because my father wasn't healthy growing up.
Hmm.
And, he was in his 40s, early 40s when he had a kidney transplant, but got down to like 8% kidney function. So
Mm.
we didn't expect him to survive. And so he was then preparing my mom. He sent her to nursing school so that she could have a job that would help us.
Yeah, right,
You know,
right.
the house that he still lives in, he bought because he thought that would be a house that my mom could manage herself. And I think that got me thinking too about legacy earlier on than maybe I
Yeah.
would have. And like what footprint do you want to leave? Like we're here for a certain period of time, but after we're gone, we're gone. What we do throughout those years and what stays from that maybe touches people that are still here is really important.
Hmm.
And so I feel like people should think more about that.
I would agree. I wish I had started thinking about it earlier.
So, what season do you think people appreciate the least?
I would say the appreciation is definitely connected directly to the difficulty. And if you think of, just pretend that seasons are defined by the amount of fog, and that when things are going right, there's no fog, and when things are struggling, there is fog. I think foggy seasons are the scariest, the ones we want to get out of the fastest. And the ones, as I've said before, I think they teach us the most. I'm old enough that I've been fired a couple of times. And I remember once I was fired, my wife and young son were at a library story hour. And that's when I walked in, and that's when I told them I needed a new job. And at that moment, that season was changing, and I was not very confident. I was afraid of what
Mm,
was going to happen. And
yeah.
so I think that the foggier it is, the harder it is.
I feel like there's a lot of people going through that right now with so much change happening and the unknown of AI. Well, some of it's known, some of it's unknown, and what that's
Mhm.
doing to the workforce. And then just the cost of living, being able to afford a house for those that are in their 20s and 30s trying to buy their first house.
Hmm.
What advice would you give to those that are in their 20s, 30s, even 40s who are trying hard to save money for a house? The down payments are crazy, mortgage rates are crazy, gas prices are insane, it's really hard. It's very expensive to live today. And I do feel bad for those younger generations because it wasn't like that for me when I bought my first house. Things were affordable, at least. So, if you could speak to those 20s, 30s, and even 40-year-olds who are listening that just feel like they can't get there, what would your
Budget.
advice be? A
Budget
budget.
is a budget. When you do a budget, stop and think about it. A budget is a forward-thinking concept, and you are thinking about what kind of income or revenue you have and what kind of expenses you have. And when you do the income and the revenue and the bottom line is negative, you have to go back and adjust some of the expenses. And if the bottom line is zero, you also have to go back and change some of the expenses or get some more revenue. So a budget is one of the smartest decision-making tools that anybody can have. So you do a budget process and it comes out negative, and the biggest thing is your car. You have a Lamborghini. Well, it's maybe time for a Kia. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times we make those financial decisions without a budget in mind. We paid $300 a month for our last car, but this one's cool and it's got a touch screen. I can pay $450. Well, guess what? That's $150 that isn't going to a down payment. I would say budget, because staying with the season theme, every one of those seasons has a different cost,
Yeah.
a different cost of living.
To that point, every season has a purpose, even the ones that we don't choose. And getting back to what you said earlier, there's things that are temporary that we don't think are temporary when we're living through it, but everything has its lifespan. And in thinking about lifespan, just remember to our listeners out there that if you are in a spot where things feel really heavy or difficult right now, it is temporary. Just think of the saying, this too shall pass, and try to absorb what you can as far as learning from what you're going through, because it will serve you later. It might not feel like it, but it absolutely will serve you later. So take from it what you can to benefit you in some way. Ed, thanks for joining us for this special podcast series on the seasons that shape us. And I'm super excited to continue. We talked a little bit today about to everything there is a season, right? Right from the song itself. And then next time we're going to talk about the seasons that change us, which is going to be a really, I think, important and impactful episode for our listeners. And then our third in the series is the season after, which is all about reinvention and renewal and beginning again, which is a great way to end it. So thank you so much for being a part of this.
Looking forward to the next one.
Thanks for listening today. If this episode sparked something in you, please share it with a friend, leave a comment or a review, and reach out and let me know what resonated. Remember, no matter what age or stage of life you're in, you can pivot. And always remember, the second half of life is not a winding down. It's a waking up. Please follow or subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of our podcast family. Let's keep showing up and being the best version of ourselves. Until next time, take care.